Hello everyone and welcome to another Bleach ranking video, one that was frequently requested after I did my 13 captains ranking. So today we're going to be looking at the lieutenants or the vice captains of Bleach, at least the ones that I've met so far. Now before we start, as a reminder, I am currently in the middle of reading Bleach, and this ranking only takes into account the things that I've seen so far. For these characters, that will mostly include information through the Soul Society arc. The interesting thing is going to be with the lieutenants, I still haven't seen much from a lot of these characters yet, so a lot of this is going to be based mostly on my first impressions of them, because I really haven't had a chance to learn much about a good chunk of these characters. So a lot of it's going to be just kind of my own personal feelings. This isn't a power ranking, this isn't trying to figure out who's strongest. This is solely my personal opinion based on what I've seen so far, but fair warning, a lot of these characters I really haven't gotten to understand fully or explore much yet, so just keep that in mind as we go through. If someone's very low and they're the most fascinating character in Bleach, it's either I don't like them or I haven't seen why they're fascinating yet. It's all personal opinion. Please don't string me up and execute me for any of the opinions I have on this list. Thank you. Also keep in mind this only includes the lieutenants. It does not include some of the other seeded squad members. So my boy Ikaku will not be on this list, which is actually lucky for all of these lieutenants because he would clear every single one of them. I love that man. Anyway, moving on. Here we go with the ranking of the lieutenants of Bleach so far. At number 13, last place on this list, we have Omaida. The funny thing is, I had Omaida's captain, Soi Fon, as the lowest captain in that ranking, so maybe I just don't like their squad, or maybe it's that so far, Omaida seemed kind of shallow and kind of just as blindly obedient as his captain is. I'm just not big on characters that don't think for themselves or are entitled, and so far Omaida kinda checks some of those boxes. He just doesn't seem that pleasant, and he hasn't been that fun in his small appearances, so maybe that'll change, but right now, to me, he's just a simple brute and is the least interesting character on this list. But again, maybe I can be proven wrong in the future. For now, he's at the bottom. Next on the list, we have Chojuro, who is an example of why this whole lieutenant ranking is somewhat challenging at this point in the story for some of these characters, because I haven't seen enough of him to really gauge my feelings toward him yet. I like his design. There's an obvious sense of maturity and experience to him, and he's got that kind of old school Douglas Fairbanks swagger going on. Maybe it's just the mustache and the sword, but all we really know about him is that he's head captain Yamamoto's lieutenant, which actually kind of says a lot on its own potentially. He's probably pretty tough and probably pretty loyal, and he was able to keep up with Ichigo a little bit, better than some of the other lieutenants for a moment. Personality-wise though, I can't really comment on him much yet, but I dig his look, and I hope we learn more about him. Next we have Asane, who from what I can tell seems like a genuinely good egg of a person. She's Unohana's lieutenant for one thing, so kind of shares that quiet, comforting disposition in some ways, but when I think of Asane, I think of the little moment where she reacted to Yamamoto lying to Ruki about sparing her friends at the execution. Asane didn't like that he was saying that when she knew for sure that he was going to have them killed, but it was explained to her that, it was actually kind of merciful to tell someone that their friends were going to live before they died. But I think of that. I think of her being kind of morally responsible, and just how angry she was at Aizen's betrayal, and how she was willing to stand up to him and Gin without any hesitation. Like, I respect that. I think she's got a good head on her shoulders, but she really hasn't stood out beyond that to me. And her design isn't super memorable either, so that's why she's as low as she is. And next on the list we have Nanao. Nanao seems all business, especially in comparison to her captain Shunsui, and I love that dynamic between the two of them because they juxtapose each other so well. Shunsui is kind of a free spirit, does things his own way, very dramatic, very showy, and he needs someone in his life to kind of rein him in a little. And I love how Nanao often punishes him for his antics, or she'll help up until a point where he annoys her, like with him making her provide his pedal entrance. It was great stuff. You also get the impression that Nanao is probably pretty powerful underneath her more reserved demeanor, because she was willing to just finish off Chad at the end of that fight without a second thought, so she probably, I assume, could have murdered Chad pretty easily right then. Good character, great interaction with her captain, and I think that's, for me, a vital point of how much I enjoy these lieutenants, is kind of the relationship they have with the captains that I know better, and maybe that'll change as it goes too, but for now, a lot of my enjoyment kind of hinges on how they respond and how they reflect the characters that I know a little bit better too. Complementary is the word I'm looking for. I feel like a lot of these lieutenants are complementary to what's going on with their captains. Anyway, moving on. And next we have Hisagi. Hisagi's kind of a complicated one for me because I feel like I should love this guy based on his design alone. He's got like a very cool, edgy, mysterious kind of thing going on. He seems like a character that probably has a lot of fangirls, some fanboys. Just he seems cool. He's just got a cool vibe. Like of all these lieutenants, you point him out and you probably go, he's the coolest one. My thing with him so far is just I really haven't seen him in action yet. There was that flashback with Momo and Renji where I think he was described as something of a prodigy, like the youngest to attain his rank at that point or whatever, but he just hasn't really had enough time on the panel for me to really decide how much I like him. I think he's really cool looking. I think the 69 on his face is interesting. I'm not sure if that maybe means something else in the Soul Society, or maybe it means the same thing as it does here, and this man is just very open about such things, and I am not going to judge. I mean, technically I'm here to judge. I'm judging his character and where he ranks here, but I will not judge him for that. The other thing with Hisagi is him and a couple of the other Soul Reaper lieutenants have really good potential conflict, because he is one of the 3 lieutenants on this list who had his captain betray the Soul Society. And what that means for him, we'll see going forward, but his captain Tozen did turn out to be a traitor. So we'll see as we go forward what that means for Hisagi, but for now he's just kind of a cool looking dude with a memorable tattoo. And speaking of lieutenants who are dealing with the ramifications of treacherous captains, next on the list we have Momo. Poor Momo Hinamori. I've talked a lot about Momo in some of my other videos about how sorry I feel for her, since she seems like legitimately such a sweet and genuine person. But out of everyone, she was probably the one that was most betrayed by Aizen. So it's easy to feel really sorry for her, because not only was she betrayed by the person that she cared about most, but she's still dealing with that trauma and trying to heal from it, and it's just rough. I hope somehow down the line, Momo gets a chance to get some payback for how she was manipulated and toyed with. I just really need to see this girl win, but I feel for her, and I hope there's good things for her in the future. And next on the list we have Iba. Iba has got a memorable look. Maybe it's just the shades. You can never go wrong when you just have a manga character perpetually wear sunglasses. It just adds something. I can't explain it, but I like it. He mostly stands out to me because of his attitude toward fighting and the camaraderie he had during a fight with Ikkaku. Probably because they said that he was originally from the 11th Division, which is home to some of my favorite fight-loving warmongers, so I practically need to love him by association at this point. But really what I like about him is the dichotomy that he comes from Kenpachi's division, so he has some of those more hostile traits, but now he's the lieutenant to Komamura, who is an altogether different kind of captain. I think that's interesting, just philosophically, for him to kind of have to live in. I dig that, and I dig him, and I think we'd hang out, to be honest. I could hang out with Iba. And next on the list we have Nemu. And you might be wondering why Nemu is so high on this list, because I've barely seen her. But that whole fight with Mayuri was such a highlight of the story for me so far, and Nemu was part of that because she's such an interesting addition to Mayuri's mad scientist ways. So from what I've learned so far, Nemu is one of Mayuri's creations, which is fascinating because that means he made like a full-blown Soul Reaper, which, come to think of it, may not be that rare considering what's going on with some of Urahara's employees, but I think she's interesting for that reason, but she has a very toxic, interesting relationship with her creator, which makes you feel bad because Mayuri is straight up abusive to her. When I think of her, I think of how she was forced to allow herself to get hurt during the fight. Like, that was really messed up. I think there's a lot of potential for interesting exploration of who she is, what she is, and what this means for Mayuri's, experiments and how the things that he explores with his creepy science. I just feel like there's an interesting backstory there, and Nemu's one of the characters that I'm most curious about, so that's why she makes it so high on the list. And next on the list we have Izuru. And like I was talking about a little earlier, part of the appeal of these lieutenants is the bonds and relationships that we see them have with their captains, and how their position is changed by the events happening around them. Izuru is one of the most interesting with that regard. He was Gin's lieutenant, and as I've talked about before, Gin is obviously a suspicious individual to both the readers and other characters, but Izuru is fiercely loyal to him anyway. He protected him from Momo and even tried to distract Rengiku and Hitsugaya like he was asked to, but the thing is, Izuru was apparently not aware of any of Gin's betrayal. He didn't know about Aizen's plans. He was manipulated and used like a puppet by his own captain, and he didn't realize it until it was too late. And just like with Momo, that's a great conflict for him to have to deal with. The weight of the part that he played in working for someone that was a traitor, and never suspecting him, not even for a moment. But speaking of the weight of things, his Zanpakuto's power to increase the weight of whatever it touches kind of terrifies me, in the same way that Dragon Ball Z characters training in heavy gravity scares me. It's a very cool power though, and I love the look of the Zanpakuto. He's a cool character, and I hope we get to explore more of his feelings on the betrayal and the part that he inadvertently played in it. And next we have Yashiru. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I hope I'm pronouncing a lot of these names right. Correct me if I'm wrong, always. I welcome it. If you know anything about my feelings toward Bleach characters, then you probably know that Kenpachi is my favorite character in the series so far. And Yashiru seems to be just as much of a fan of Kenny as I am. I'm honestly a little jealous that she gets to cling on to that beautiful psychopath's shoulders all the time. But outside of her relationship with Kenny, she's probably the person on this list that interests me the most. Just look at her. She's this cute little kid that has been hinted to be very powerful and even intimidates other Soul Reapers, but she's always just so chipper and supportive. She's just Kenny's little shoulder monkey sidekick. I hope she turns out to be an absolute beast in combat, like full-on Yoda with a lightsaber. That's what I want from her character. I think she shares that bloodlust with Kenpachi, so I want her to unleash it. And at number 3, I have Kaien. Poor Kaien. I wasn't sure if I was even going to put him on the list at first, but he is, one of the lieutenants. From what I can tell, his position still hasn't been filled, so I thought it probably would be best to still include him. And of all these characters, I mean, he's number 3. He's pretty high. And I think that has to do with how much focus he was given during those flashback chapters. Like, he hasn't been in the story much, technically, but there was such a focus on him and Rukia and Ukitake and the tragedy that led to Kaien's death, and it was sad. It was tough to see, and I like that he reminds everyone of Ichigo. I like that he resembles Ichigo. I think all of that's pretty interesting, which makes him a pretty likable character because he has a lot of the same attitude and traits and values that Ichigo had, so it helps that he was that way, so his death still hurt really bad having to read it, and knowing that Rukia is still haunted by it. Yeah, I really liked Kaien. I'm sad he died, but I appreciate the role he played in the story, and what it's meant for Rukia and Ichigo going forward. At number 2, I have Rengiku. Rengiku at first glance may seem like she's just there to be eye candy for like boob lovers, but she's actually proven to be the lieutenant that surprised me the most so far. It's far more complicated than I initially believed. She's a character that's a lot of fun, so she can bounce off of more serious characters like Hitsugaya in really entertaining ways, but she can also get very serious and has heart-to-hearts with people like Orihime. But she also seems to have a very tragic and potentially romantic backstory with Gin, which I can't wait to learn more about. She kind of strides that great balance of being kind of lighthearted on the surface, but hiding something very, very serious beneath. And those characters are always interesting to unpack. I'm looking forward to seeing more of her dealing with the fact that the man that she seems to have feelings for completely and utterly betrayed her. So it'll be interesting seeing the two of them on completely opposing sides. And now we've reached the number 1 spot of the list. And was there any real doubt that Renji Abarai would be the number 1 spot? Out of all these characters, he's easily the one that we've seen the most of so far, and rightfully so. Renji has turned out to actually have a lot of layers after initially appearing as kind of a one-dimensional rival and foil to Ichigo. I've loved his growth that he's undergone since being introduced. I've enjoyed his role in the story since the beginning, and watching him go from a rival to an ally after undergoing a lot of development was wonderful, and I can't wait to see where he continues to go. I have really high hopes for him, honestly. I think by the end of the series, I assume he'll be maybe like a captain or at least be really good friends with Ichigo, and I really want to see that. I think that Kubo did a great job of giving Renji relationships that told us a lot about his character, whether it was his childhood friendship with Rukia, whether it was his contempt toward his captain Byakuya. There's just a lot to him, and he's a great character. I'd say he's one of the best characters in the series so far. So yeah, Renji easily takes the #1 spot. And that's going to do it, guys, for the lieutenant ranking for what I've seen so far in Bleach. I hope you enjoyed. I hope I didn't sound too terrible. I'm still dealing with being sick, so my voice isn't great. But I hope you enjoyed. Let me know what your lists are. Who are some of your favorites? Remember, please no spoilers. But yeah, this is the lieutenant list for me at this point in the series. Like the other ranking lists, maybe I'll do one further down the road when I've seen more of these characters and where they go. Thank you all so much for watching. Please comment, like, subscribe, and I'll see you all soon. Take care.